Good morning, everyone. It's Joker, and today we are back with another slime video. And because I have thoroughly tested every unit, including free-to-play Frey, even though she's not technically done yet, I am fairly confident in where I want to put all the new Protector of Peace units on the tier list. So we're going to do that today. And thankfully we only have one skill fusion to worry about, but I do have a small condition for the Protector. So let's go ahead and start with the free-to-play unit, that way we can get him out of the way, which is the new Armored Geld. Now, I like Armored Geld as a character. I like what he does in the game. Unfortunately, there are not a lot of places to use him for his maximum effectiveness, but the places where you can, he is very, very impactful. He works best on green stacking teams, of which there's only 3, and one of them doesn't need him because it's the idle team, which leaves us with the current Protectors of Peace team, and, well, there's 4, and one doesn't need him, so there's 3 teams, realistically. Overlord Rimuru, which we can't get that team anymore. The first anniversary Dark team, of which he is very effective there. And then the current Protectors of Peace team. And there are no other green stacking teams in the game, which makes him a bit unnecessary for burst-focused teams because we don't need that many skill points. His weakness resistance down is cool, does help out other characters, and his orb change is limited to himself or other Protectors of Peace characters. It's okay. Now, I'm going to put him in decent, strictly because there are not a lot of teams that use him. The green buff only works on green orbs, and I think some people are forgetting that. It increases Soul of Skills skill point increase. It's not all souls, otherwise he would probably be up here. And very, I don't really care about where their placement is within the tier, but he would be very, very, very good. But he's only doing skill points, which only means something to 2 teams, because the Overlord team doesn't need that, because Overlord Reamer does that already. So, Anniversary, First Annie team, and the Protector of Peace. He's still a good character. He's just not up at this specific level of character tier that I think. If he were to give skill points to all souls, he would be up here. If there were more green stacking teams overall, where he could be used, he would be up here. It doesn't mean he's shit, by any means. He's very good. He's just not tippity top tier because there are not a lot of teams that necessitate him. But still, very decent character. More useful than I think Glenda, or Cleash, or Romrus, or Xion, or any of these characters, but still not in the top tier. So he would be top of his class in A. Okay, moving on to Protectors. Frey, I think, is probably up here with the other Protectors. She is stacking attack, which is universal. It's only 5%, but it is universal. She has a skill point reset as a free-to-play character. This is the most impactful thing. A free-to-play 4-star Protector with not a chance to, or specific force limited, but everybody gets a skill reset, and that, I think, pushes her into the tiers of actually good Protectors. Like, mine is not technically done yet, but I've used Frey a lot for those EX challenge quests, and what I can say is, Jesus Christ, she would have been a top-tier Protector, like, a year and a half ago, and that's saying something. Attack stack, skill point increase, skill reset. So if you pair her with Geld, like, that's going to work out really well for even free-to-play players. Those are 2 free-to-play characters, and they work very well together. So I think Frey is in the same tier as these other Protectors. Diablo's super old. Veldora is doing essentially what Frey does, but he eventually caps out. He stacks points a little faster, but he caps out eventually. Frey does not. Maribel's shit for an EX Protector. I really think that Frey is this good. This good. And if you have not used her, I suggest you do use her, especially if you don't have access to a skill point reset Protector like Masayuki, or Veldora, or Rimuru, or Vengeance Velzard in that point. Now, We move on to Masayuki. And currently, there are two different versions of Masayuki. There's, hey, I pulled Masayuki off of Lucky Koban or the Free Maltese, and he's the only character I have for Protectors of Peace, of which case I would put him in decent. 8% attack stacks, skill reset, skill cap increase, unlimited usage of skills, which if you don't have the rest of the team, it doesn't really matter. He is just about as good as Frey, because if you can only send 6 orbs in a hand, he's doing 8% attack versus Frey's 5. He is really, surprisingly, not that much better than his free-to-play protector that came with his own meta. So he is good. He's fine, but he's really, really limited by the characters that he should be leading. You know, skill cap increase by 50, sure, excellent. Geld can help with that. The Inspire thing, again, if you can only send 6 orbs in a hand and you have no other way to enhance that, you're locked to 8% attack out of his potential, quote-unquote, 40%. It's not really that impressive. He lowers your skill cap, or he skill resets. Okay, Frey does that too. And then in here, lost in here, battle skills can be activated an unlimited number of times. That doesn't really make too much of a difference for teams that normally you orb change once and you have a full 6 hand of greens. It can be useful, yes, but for teams that are not built for having low point skills that do low cost stacks that you do over and over and over and over again, it doesn't make a difference. Because if you have a team full of 80 point skills, you're only using those 80 point skills on turn 8. And you're not using them early for whatever reason. You can, but it's not the point of them. So, normal Masayuki, free to play, quote unquote Masayuki, is an A tier. He's decent. He does a lot, but his stacking aspect is not very good. And then you have the whale version of Masayuki, where you have his entire team, where you have Shion, you have Hinata, you have Rimuru, you have, well, Geld, obviously, and you have Overlord Shizu. Like, the difference between a team without these characters and a team with these characters and Masayuki is astounding. But you have to have everybody. You have to have the multi-hit from Hinata. You have to have the follow-up orbs from Shion. You have to have the ability to use the resets and the weakness strike stacks from the orb change and the alt damage stacks from Hinata's multi-hit and the crit damage stacks from Shion's follow-up orbs in order to get to that 36% attack buff every turn that Masayuki is giving. 8%, 36%. Lots of other stacks from 1, 2, 3 characters versus potentially no stacks for anybody. He exists in 2 different realms. I have him and him only, and I have literally everybody on the team, and I can do massive amounts of damage on a skill reset green focused team. That's why he is here with a $sign. So if anyone ever questions that in the future, I'm sure I will get questions, but you have to understand that he is nothing without his battle units. He is nothing. He's handy. Like, he has good things about him. But in that aspect, I'd rather just run Frey. I'd rather not spend any money for Masayuki and run Frey. She's not doing that much less. She's really not. So, base version Masayuki, whale Masayuki. There we go. Alright, and finally we have the battle units. Let's start with the Masked Hero. Her upgrade, I mean, is cool. It doesn't take away from her at all. It doesn't hurt her in any way, because it does just add a little bit extra onto it. Every time you use, I think 100 points, you get an extra 10% crit resistance down. Let me go check her really fast. And it's certainly helpful. It means that on a traditional team where you're going to use probably an extra 100 skill points, yeah, every time you use 100 skill points, you get 10% up to 60% total. So you have to use 300 points to max her out. On a traditional team, you're guaranteed to use probably at least 100 points, between some random buffs and everything. So you get 40% crit resistance down. That's good. I mean, it's an improvement. Doing 300 skill points means that you're doing a very specific team build, and 60% crit resistance is obviously better than 30. It's not super impactful, I think, and she's she is starting to fall off a bit in her usefulness. The skill fusion, I think it definitely helps her. It doesn't take her away, but it doesn't do enough to really push her up back into the triple S tier, and it's certainly not a worse skill by any means. You're getting more out of it for the same use. So she's just going to exist next to herself on SS tier, as she should. Okay, before we get started, I'm re-recording this part of the video days later, so I can't actually move Hinata, Shion, and Rimuru back down to the bottom without resetting the entire list. But after thinking about it, sleeping on it, and coming to the realization that I originally placed them too high in the part that you haven't seen, we need to make a few changes to the existing list first, and that pretty much removes a lot of the characters from the A tier and puts them lower. And I will explain my reasoning after I do those edits. Okay, what I have done is I have pretty much gutted the A tier, the decent but limited, and I've removed everybody and put them down into can be helpful or situational. And this is because this game really heavily, at least in usefulness, favors characters that can help other teams along with themselves. So, Primal Demon Diablo, he's orb changing. He's giving a pretty massive physical buff. He's giving guaranteed pierce rate, while also being a very competent AoE DPS. Elmezia, AoE DPS, ult resistance down for everybody. The ult damage is a little bit restricted, that's why she's not in S tier. These characters can help the teams out in multiple ways, apart from just being pure damage. What we had in the A tier before was a lot of pure damage characters. Blanc, Tempest Elite Rimuru, Shinsha, Milim, Primal Demon Diablo. These characters do not really help other teams out. They help themselves, and they very, very quickly, pretty much at the end of their dedicated month, really fall off. And then they have only slight value during reruns or during a randomly specific Jubilee normal stage. And that's the only part. So I can't really give them a higher ranking if they're only useful one stage every 4 or 5 months at that point. Everybody is SSS tier during their meta, and that's not how I want to rank things, alright? I want to rank them over general viability, which means cutting out the fat for the A tier. Now, with that in mind, it does make it a little bit easier to rank the 3 characters that I had already done, but then rethought. Because Rimuru and Shion, situational at best. Why? Because they really only help themselves. Rimuru has a single orb change. Okay, that's not very powerful by itself. He stacks Weakness Strike on it. Okay, that's only for him. His big time buff is 150% ult damage for himself, and then everybody gets guaranteed crits, which is not like a high and mighty kind of buff at this point. If it was guaranteed crits, 50% crit damage and 100% ult damage for himself, or 50% crit damage for everybody, and then 100% ult damage for himself, then he would be higher. But it's not. It's just guaranteed crits. That's his only real team-wide usage besides his singular orb change. And if he's not under Masayuki, where you can use him like 4 times in a row in the same turn, it's just ever going to be a single orb change. That's not very viable for other teams. And the same thing with Shion. She gives herself the water buff, and what's the other thing? I have it up. I can't remember what the other part of her skill is. Ult resistance down. You know, that is moderately helpful, but the rest of her kit is kind of useless. It's kind of shit, actually. So, okay, ult resistance down 100%. Water attack. Doesn't help anyone but herself. The green follow-up orbs really doesn't help anybody except for her own team, and even then it's kind of stupid. And then her own personal crit damage by 10%. Again, only helps herself. You could argue that the 100% ult resistance down matches what Elmezia does up here, and so there's a long, long gap in between themselves. But the thing is, Elmezia's other buffs help the team. You know, it does require some specific team building, earth and fire, for your HP and your ult damage, but at least she can actually help other people. Shion doesn't help anybody but herself with her other skills. So she's not, her and Elmesia are not the same thing. The 100% alt resistance down is cool, but I really got to factor in the rest of their kits to really fairly rank them, at least in my opinion, fairly rank them. And then that leaves Hinata, easily the best character out of here, and she is pretty much Ogre's Pride Soe, but for crits. Because Ogre's Pride Soe, who's up in SS tier, right here, he gives all magic allies a 70% attack buff. Okay, Hinata gives a physical attack buff to physical allies, 70%. It's, you know, one's for magic allies, one's for physical allies, sure. And then Soe gives 50 to 100% synergy power, and Hinata gives 50 to 100% crit resistance down. So they're built for two different things. One's a magic synergy, one's a crit physical. But they are almost the same character. The part where Hinata becomes a bit less useful than Soe is Soe's Orb Change is very, very versatile versus Hinata's second skill, which is the multi-hits, but it does also stack ult damage. So even though you might be running her on like a blue team, the multi-hit isn't going to do jack shit, but she is still giving everybody 10% extra ult damage. So that's why she's still up here with Soe and not one tier down. Because she is helping big time, and then her second buff, while not maybe as quote-unquote useful as Soe, is still damage buffing the entire team. So Hinata, double S tier, she's fairly good if you can put her on a team that needs her. We gutted the A tier, and we've put them all down. I think people will be surprised to see Exalted Champion Milim down in B tier, but you gotta remember, she is just pure raw damage. And technically, I should probably rank her down into C tier at situational, because sometimes you don't need a win single target nuker. And she's not doing anything else for the team. She's got a personal buff, and then her gimmick is the free ult. In fact, it feels sacrilegious even to move her into C tier, but if I'm going to grade her that way, she is situational at best. She doesn't really help the team. I can't put her on the Primal Demon team and be like, okay, help them. Like, it's not going to work. I can't put her on Warrior's Mind and say, okay, help them. I can't even put her on the fucking Protectors of Peace team because, again, they're not going to do anything for her. She's magic and wind. She gets nothing except the green stuff. She doesn't even get the Inspire skill from Masayuki. So, people don't like how I do this tier list, but I could say that about any tier list made by everybody ever. You can go to the McDonald's tier list and people will rank that shit and people hate it. Alright? I'm here to rank them on what my perspective is and how I determine a unit's overall kit viability and usefulness. So you are free to have your own opinions. That's fine. It's a tier list. It's a free country for now. But let me know your thoughts on the new Protectors of Peace rankings and the gutting of the A tier. But that's it for me, guys. Take it easy, and I will see you all later.